Now that your melons are starting to size up, it leaves a big question. How do you know when your melons are ripe?
Most melons will be ripe in about 7 to 8 weeks after pollination and fruit set. But that will vary with the amount of heat in the summer and also the variety of melon that you're growing. New Queen watermelon are the earliest of all watermelon that I've grown. In a hot summer, they're ripe in about 5 weeks after pollination. One of my favorites is a Crimson Sweet, an old standard watermelon. Crimson Sweets take 8 or more weeks to mature in southern Alberta following pollination. So there is a wide range of time. The best way to tell if a watermelon is ripe is to cut it. Now, you can't cut every watermelon to check it, but the next best method to determine ripeness is to check the color of the ground spot. The ground spot is the underside of the melon that is sitting on the ground. The color of the classic ground spot will turn from a whitish light green when it's underripe to a creamy yellow color that is infused with some bright yellow, as in this photo of a ripe yellow dull watermelon. Now this is a classic ground spot color pattern. You can use this color pattern in evaluating many of the store-bought watermelons that you might be looking at, and also many of the watermelons that you will grow. Now, to check the ground spot of a melon in your patch, roll the melon over slightly and look at the bottom. Now make sure you don't turn the melon too far, because that could break the stem of the melon, and you'd be sad if you had an unripe melon. You can also tilt the melon to peek underneath. Put one hand on the stem end with the stem between your fingers, and then tilt the other end of the melon up so you can see the color on the bottom. Now there are several other indicators of ripeness. Some are better than others. Some people say that a melon will be ripe when the tendril next to the stem has turned brown. Now the tendril is a short, straight growth with a curly queue on the end, and it's kind of, depending on the plant, 2 to 4 inches long. You'll find tendrils all along the vines, but there'll be one right on the stem next to the melon. Now this method has not been a reliable one for me. Sometimes the tendril turns brown before the melon is ripe, and oftentimes the tendril is still green when the melon is even overripe. Melons will often have a slight color change when they are ripe. It's another way to tell, but you need to know this color change, and that takes some experience. Now with some melons, the color of the ripe melon is slightly duller than the melon's color when underripe. Now if you're very good at seeing subtle changes, a ripe melon often will have a slightly bumpier, rougher skin than an unripe melon. You might be able to see that in this Crimson Sweet melon. You can see rough spots in it. Not that there's gouges, but there's a little bumpier than the very smooth melon would be. Now, despite those alternate ways of looking for ripeness, really the ground spot is the best way to tell. You just need to know the color change for the variety that you grow. So here are some clues to different varieties. If you were to grow Jade Star watermelon, which are almost black in color, the ground spot will turn from a bright yellow to almost bright orange when the melon is ripe. As well with Jade Stars, often little circles will also appear here or there in the dark rind when the melon is ripe. Now Shiny Boy is a new variety. This one will reach 15 pounds or more. The ground spot on a ripe Shiny Boy is a light creamy yellow with some brighter yellow on the stripes, which is a more traditional ground spot. Now, new queens are small but very sweet and very early, and also very productive. New queens are orange-fleshed melons. When ripe, they have a traditional bright yellow striping on the bottom. Their rind often turns a duller green when ripe as well. Now, the largest melon I've ever grown was a 37-pound Vista. Most Vistas are in the 18 to 25-pound range. The ground spot on these melons often is a long, light yellow band along the bottom of the melon. If the bottom is all yellow or a dark yellow, the melon is overripe. And that's the usual case on many melons. The one in this photo is just right, with that nice band of yellow showing. Vista seed isn't available anymore. I've done some crossbreeding to improve it, and have produced a Vista-like variety called Sweet Treat. Now, the cut melon in the photo is a Sweet Treat. Its ground spot is the same as the Vista. A new variety that's readily available is Mini Love. It has a broad yellow ground spot when ripe. Mini Loves are somewhat small but very productive and very early. They also have a great taste, like a traditional red melon should, though they are a little bit crunchy. Now, thumping a melon with your hand or flicking it with your middle finger can help tell if the melon is at the right stage for picking. If you are in a store choosing a watermelon, hit it with an open palm while holding the melon in your arm. If it has a dead thump sound, it is sadly overripe. A perfect melon cracks when you cut it. Now, if a watermelon sounds like it might crack when you slap it, then it's just right. A melon at the right stage will resonate or vibrate all the way through because it is crisp. Combine this slapping with the ground spot test to choose the perfect melon. I wish every time, but most times. Now, let's talk cantaloupe. Cantaloupe have 3 indicators of ripeness. For many varieties, you check what's called the slip. If you pull the stem away from a cantaloupe and it pulls off very easy, that is called a full slip. And the cantaloupe will be either ripe or maybe even overripe. If the stem pulls off fairly easy but with some resistance, that's called partial slip, and the melon is just right to pick. If it does not pull off at all, it's not ripe. However, quite a few of the newer varieties, like Athena, don't slip at all. Now, the next way to test is to look at the color. Ripe cantaloupe turn from a dark green between the netting to a light beigey orange when ripe. The final way to tell ripeness is smell. Smell the cantaloupe, and if it smells aromatic, like a cantaloupe should, it is ready. The yellow melon in the following photo is a hammy melon, which has a light salmon orange flesh inside. Hammies are crunchy when they're ripe. This one is just underripe and needs a few days to finish ripening up. Hammy melons turn a deep orange brown under a light beige netting. Push on the blossom end, and if there's a slight give and the color is well developed, you have a ripe melon. Canary melons are canary yellow when ripe and will often have a few thin, brown, tiny cracks near the stem when they're ripe. The blossom end will also have a little give when you push on it. Canary melons are very sweet and pleasant tasting, like an extra sweet honeydew. The ripeness of honeydews is a bit challenging for me anyway to tell. In the varieties that I've grown, the color will turn from a darker green to a dusty green with a hint of yellow. The melon will show a bit of softness when pressed on the blossom end. A very ripe honeydew will have a pleasant smell if you've grown it to maturity. and a tinge of yellow will be noticeable in the rind. Santa Claus melons will go from dark green to having some yellow, even orange yellow on some of the skin. They also have fine cracks like a canary melon, which are normal for this melon. The flesh of a Santa Claus melon is creamy with some green tinge. To me, it has less taste than many melons, and not as sweet as other melons. Now that said, they are the favorite melon of some of my grandkids. As mentioned before, the one method to tell if a melon is ripe that works every time is to cut it. When that test is successful, and it's a melon you grew, what a wonderful experience. Now you've babied your melons as they've grown and they're getting near ripe. Cutting into the first one is a bit scary. Use the tips in this video to help you choose when to sample that first melon. Then, best of all, enjoy that delicious melon flavor right out of your own garden.